Before getting into this video, I would first like to ask you a question. Now, I understand it's hard to answer, but personally, what would you say is the most important aspect of a game? Now, there are no wrong answers here. For some people, it's the action, the act of overcoming something challenging. To other people, it might be they want something a little more social that they can talk about and meet new people with that they couldn't otherwise in the real world. Like any hobby, gaming isn't just one thing, and many people are into this activity for different reasons. For me personally, above all else, what makes a game special and what I would say is the most important aspect is escapism. In 1997, a group of Japanese game developers under the name Dusk created and released the title Atelier the Alchemist of Salzburg. It was a Japanese role-playing game that was tied to the typical status quo of having the player save a world and becoming a hero, instead focusing on social aspects and having the game being more light-hearted, with it being centered around alchemy and creating different items to aid you in battle or for trading to NPCs around the world. It was around the 5th generation of gaming with the PlayStation 1 in particular where we saw a lot of developers start to experiment more with JRPGs and just what you could do with the genre outside of just playing the role of a hero. It was a big turning point for many games, both on a technological level and a written one. You can really see this when looking back at the library of games from back then. They were very experimental and in some ways still are to this very day. Anyway, fast forward after the success of Atelier in Japan and with the 14th installment of the series originally released on the PlayStation 3, and you have Atelier Ayeasha, the Alchemist of Dusk. Now, if JRPGs are a niche, the best way I could explain this series is that they are a niche within a niche. The games aren't on the same budget as something like Persona or Final Fantasy, but they don't have to be. Where they excel is in their good vibes and appeal. These titles might not click with everyone, but they're sort of not supposed to. They stay within their niche in this genre, and as a result of this, it's garnered a very passionate following of fans over in the years, especially in the West. Getting into the actual story of Atelier Ayeasha itself, things are very simple. You play as Ayeasha Ortugal, an apothecary who lives in the middle of the countryside. She's very light-hearted and is a bit of an airhead, but definitely sets up the kind of game this is with her demeanour. Now, it sounds serious at first, but the main quest of this game has Ayeasha saving her sister, Neo. It turns out she was spirited away sometime before the events of this game, and after stumbling upon this alchemist known as Kiefergriff, he gives you a very vague idea of where to start looking, telling you that these flowers are somehow connected and are the roots behind Neo's disappearance. All you can really gather is that you'll want to study to become an alchemist as the means of ever finding your sister, since being spirited away has something to do with it all. And this is the general gist of the game. Ayeasha sets off to see the outside world for the first time, accompanied by just her cow Panna, and things are very much light-hearted and easygoing. This game is very much designed as an open objective experience. You sort of just go and bump into a ton of random events, mostly having nothing to do with your main goal. But they usually result in you learning something new to synthesize alongside seeing the character arc unfold, so they're well worth going out of your way to see since they make up this game as a whole. Now, as you explore this world, collecting items and interacting with characters, you're bound to bump into one aspect to these older Atelier titles that is sure to terrify some players by its mere mention alone.
A time limit? There's a time limit?
That's right, all these activities come at a cost. We have a time limit that progresses from doing most things such as gathering materials around the world and synthesizing items. We'll discuss the alchemy system later in this video, by the way. Thankfully, however, there is nothing to fear. As someone who's already finished this game, the time limit in this entry is extremely generous. As long as you're mindful of its existence and make sure to save stack, you'll never run into any issues. I understand that this can be a complete turn off for some people by its mere mention alone, but time limits can greatly increase the game's sense of urgency. But I found that in Atelier Ayeasha it goes in another direction with it. Your journey feels realised with an actual time frame. Characters reference how long it's been in the story, for example. It also makes sense since wherever your sister is probably isn't safe, and a time limit does give you that sense of it being important. This game is very much designed around this system, and I never felt like I was running out of time personally, but I did see some people online run into this issue, and the game maybe should have communicated it better, so it's best to be mindful of this fact before jumping into this game. Similar to something like Persona, the life simulation aspects are a big part of the Atelier series. Every year in the beginning of December, for example, there's an auction where you can sell the goods you've made. I wish these auctions were in the more modern entries since your party members also appear here alongside some NPCs with unique interactions. It's all fully voice acted on top of that. It lends itself really well to the light-hearted angle that this game is going for. Also, each year shakes things up by having different characters participating in the event. Speaking of, your party members in Atelier Ayeasha really brings this game's world to life. Since you're very much a traveller, you'll bump into all kinds of social events with them sometimes resulting in you meeting a new party member. What I like about this approach is that unlike more traditional JRPGs, teammates don't follow you around on your journey. They can join you for battles and gather materials, but when it comes to main story moments, they're sort of just off doing their own thing. I found that the implementation of this party dynamic is a breath of fresh air and saves the game from having a huge ensemble cast saying one-liners every now and then, which is a trap I see in a lot of other JRPGs. This is very much Ayeasha's story, and the balance between each party member is done very well to keep it that way. Ayeasha's dynamic of going out on her own as a solo journey is nice. There's something to say about this title and how it really sells you on its adventure with the whole fish out of water thing that it has going on. I feel like if there was just one fixed party lineup for this game, it wouldn't have that same impact, and it stands out more because of this. You can also customize your party members' synergy as a result of their drop in drop out dynamic. There's definitely an intent of replay value here with the cast you can pick between alongside the time limit mechanic. Later titles in this series would opt for dual protagonists, and once again it is something that sets this entry apart and makes it worth going back to see. Moving on, the side stories in Atelier Ayeasha make up a big part of your time with this entry and are worth going out of your way for. You'll meet many colourful NPCs such as Wilma, a mischievous witch in training who you help out by synthesizing items for, and you later find out that she's been using them for her own means to cheat on exams. She's kind of unhinged. There's also Yurit, a huntsman, and his sister who you bump into a lot and are pretty much just nomads herding cows. Oh yeah, these fluffy things are known as cows in this game's world, by the way. I'm a big fan of their designs. Anyway, so needless to say, there's plenty to discover and interact with in this game's world, and it all lends itself to the very core of Atelier Ayeasha. With that being said, let's take a look at another aspect that this series is known for and can be make or break for a lot of people. Now, getting into this centralized mechanic, the alchemy system is what really makes these titles stand out on a gameplay level. This is your main means of progressing the story. At various points for plot reasons, you will have to synthesize an item that is required to move forward. You'll need to come to terms with this system to really get the edge in combat. You can also create items that will help with gathering in the game's overworld, which will result in getting better materials, which really establishes this as your main gameplay loop. If you're stuck, simply synthesize what you haven't yet. This will make you somewhat stronger and will level up your overall alchemy level. Synthesizing is the key in this game. You can also craft bombs, which is Ayeasha's main way of dealing damage during combat and is an ability only unique to her, unlike how it is in other titles where any party member can use them. Anyway, you can turn Ayeasha into an absolute powerhouse if you make the right bombs by synthesizing them with some good materials and traits. Future entries would improve on the alchemy system introduced in Ayeasha, however here it has enough features to stand on its own but isn't nearly as in depth, especially when it comes to how you can't synthesize equipment for battling and party members. They're just regular items in this entry. As a result of this, the battling in this game isn't as tied to the combat system like in future titles. However, you can still turn Ayeasha into an absolute powerhouse when giving her the right arsenal. Other party members vary in what they can do. Some are more defensive, having them buff and heal, whereas others are your typical damage dealers. This game shakes things up slightly with you constantly changing positions to separate your party members. It's still turn based, but at the end of an action you can spend meatods to move around the field and away from enemy fire. When having party members be too close, enemy attacks will hit multiple teammates but position well enough from one another, and you can attack behind an enemy, which will result in dealing more damage. You can also spend meter to create follow-up attacks or to have party members block damage that was intended for others. This can make for some great build opportunities, especially for more tankier characters. They can be very useful here and is a must for any team composition. This all results in combat feeling less level gated and more based around actual skill and coordination, which is what you want out of any great JRPG, and avoids pointless level grinding as a means to pad runtime, which this genre can be known for at times. I really like the combat system in this entry. It's turn-based, which is an aspect that modern titles have started to move away from, but I felt that the difficulty curve here was perfect. Sometimes when I die, instead of going back and leveling up, I'd just try again, being more mindful of resources and positioning, and this would typically result in a victory. Everything here is just the right amount of challenge whilst keeping things manageable, and overall it makes sure that you stay on top of your alchemy builds to tackle whatever this game has to throw at you.
No difficulty executing my duty. I think I got stronger. Alright!
Now, let's take a look at some of the smaller aspects of Atelier Ayeasha outside of its story and gameplay. First off, I have to bring up the incredible art style for this title. In particular, the illustrations and character designs are really well stylized, and personally, it all just gives off a very strong fantasy vibe. There are loads of illustrations in this game, with credit going to the lead artist for this entry, Hidari. Even the promotional art for this game are standout examples. I'll show some on screen for reference. They might just be my favourite artists of all time, and there's a really good chance that you might be familiar with their art style if you played the Fire Emblem series. A great example of just how strong their style is, here we have Fire Emblem Gaiden, an old NES game from Japan. In 2017 it was revived as a remake with Hadara as the lead artist on the project. The dual protagonists Arm and Celica had an incredible overhaul to their old NES designs, just look how great they look now. There are other examples of this, like for an 8-bit system with limited pixels, the global peak in every character had in this remake is incredible and just shows the kind of talent this artist has. Every piece of art they make gives this warm soft glow with smooth edges. It's very aesthetically pleasing in my opinion, it never gets old for me and is the very definition of timeless. This is a 3DS game by the way. There are other examples of this in the Fire Emblem series. One more is Byleth. She looks alright in Three Houses, but when Hidari puts their spin on her design, her aura and vibe is just off the charts. It really says something. Hidari even drew Hatsune Miku as a Fire Emblem character. If you've ever seen this art online, it came from this artist by the way. Anyway, tangent aside, needless to say the Dusk trilogy is by far the strongest when it comes to its art style, even with the 3D character models. Sure, the graphics have aged with newer games far surpassing it, but the art style is timeless. The more shell-shaded pastel look with the outlines is still visually appealing. And all this will surprise you once you realise that this Entra is almost 13 years old. I hope Hadari returns to the gaming scene one day so we can see more of their art style, especially with modern systems being able to bring it more to life than ever with the extra power of these machines. Moving on to more smaller aspects of this Entra is the English dub. Sadly, newer games no longer release with English voiceover options, but the older Atelier titles had dubs. It's very similar to the Yakuza series with how older games released with English voices, but due to their niche presence in the West they got cut over time. But thankfully, with Atelier's growing presence in the West, it seems like this feature may make a comeback someday. Anyway, the voice talent in Atelier Ayeasha is great overall. From the perspective of someone who values an English dub, since personally I feel more immersed in a world when I don't have to read everything, I'm glad it's here. Standouts in particular would be Ayeasha herself. The performance comes off as very humble, to put it bluntly.
Oh yeah, so getting back to the story, what's in all that luggage you brought with you out front?
They're tools I use to synthesize medicine. Like my synthesis cauldron, materials to make the medicine, other materials that I might need. Oh, and a spare cauldron. And the spare cauldron.
Whoa.
Also, further characterization with the victory animations for each character when they level up, alongside the ability to emote whenever you want, just adds to the charm of this world. I wish more single player games gave you the ability to randomly emote. Overall, I thought that going back to these older entries was going to be archaic and rough around the edges, but I was surprised by just how well Atelier Ayeasha, the Alchemist of Dusk, holds up today. In terms of this installment as a great Atelier game, it definitely stands high with the best of them. Personally, I will place it somewhere underneath Sophie 2 when it comes to measuring my all-time favourite Atelier games out of the ones I've played in this series. I would highly recommend Atelier Ayeasha today if you're looking for a JRPG experience that you can really pace yourself with, and it's truly the escapism I'm looking for personally to take myself away from the negativity of the real world. Atelier Ayeasha will have you hooked from start to finish with its slice of life gameplay that never feels too overwhelming, and it's just designed to put your mind at ease, and it's something we could all do with every now and then. But what do you think of this title? Do you have a favourite game in the Atelier series? I'm curious. Also, any feedback on this video will be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.